I was 31 when it happened, but honestly, it felt like I was 16 all over again. It started simple enough, one of those family group texts from my mom that usually just reminded us about birthdays or asked if we'd seen that weird stain on the garage floor. But this one was different. It said, "Surprise! I've booked us a beach house for the weekend pack light. We leave Friday." I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My sister Rachel sent back a bunch of question marks. My brother Josh responded with, "Wait, what beach?" And Mom, in typical fashion, just dropped a winking emoji and said, "You'll see." So, Friday comes. We all pile into our separate cars and meet at her place in the morning, half awake and not fully convinced she wasn't joking. But nope, there she was, sunglasses on, tote bag slung over her shoulder, more energy than 3 cups of coffee. "You guys are gonna love this place," she said. "It's a little outdated but right on the sand." Pure magic. I should have known something was off when she said, "a little outdated." That's Mom. Speak for, it hasn't been touched since the 90s. But whatever. The three of us, me, Rachel, Josh, we hadn't been on a trip together in years, and honestly, it felt kind of nice. Like maybe we were finally leaning back into something that had slipped away once we all got older and scattered. The drive was decent. 2 hours south, enough to feel like we were escaping, but not far enough for anyone to complain. Mom was in the lead car with Rachel. I was with Josh, who spent the entire time DJing with terrible road trip songs and reminding me why we'd stopped doing these things when we were kids. We finally pulled up to this old beach house with chipping white paint and a wraparound porch that looked like it had seen better years. But the view? The view was something else. Just dunes and ocean and sky, uninterrupted. I stepped out of the car and took a deep breath. Salt air, gulls squawking, wind that carried memories. Mom unlocked the door with a key she pulled from this weird little seashell keychain. "I told you guys," she beamed. "Isn't it perfect?" And for a second, yeah, it kind of was. There was a weird comfort in the smell of old wood and sea breeze, the mismatched furniture, the humming fridge that probably hadn't been replaced in 20 years. Josh and I took the upstairs bedroom, Rachel took the little side room with the bunk beds, and Mom claimed the master with the view. We unpacked, made sandwiches, argued about who was buying drinks later. It was normal, familiar, safe. That night, we cooked hot dogs on the grill out back, lit some citronella candles, and tried to outdo each other with terrible beach trip stories from when we were kids. Mom laughed a lot too much, maybe. The way someone laughs when they're trying to steer attention away from something. But I chalked it up to nostalgia. I didn't think twice. Not until the next morning, when we heard the front door open, and a man's voice said, "Well, I'll be damned." Josh was halfway through pouring cereal when the front door creaked open. We all turned like one synchronized alarm system. And then we heard that voice. Deep, gruff, familiar in the way that makes your stomach turn before your brain catches up. "Well, I'll be damned," he said again, this time stepping fully into view. He was holding a grocery bag in one hand and wearing sandals that should have been thrown out years ago. Mom froze. Rachel looked at me like her eyes were trying to scream. Josh actually said it out loud. "What the hell?" Standing there in the doorway, in the house my mom had supposedly rented for a peaceful family weekend, was Doug, her ex. And not just old boyfriend from college. Ex no Doug. The man she divorced 15 years ago after the kind of shouting matches that make the neighbors close their blinds. The man we hadn't seen since he left with a duffel bag and a dented pickup truck and never came back. He looked older, sure grayer, a little softer around the middle, but it was him. Still had that smug grin like he knew something the rest of us didn't. Mom didn't say anything at first, just walked toward him like someone trying to figure out whether they were dreaming or being filmed. Then she said, "Doug, I thought you weren't using the place anymore." "I wasn't," he replied, walking in like he still owned the place. "But I come down sometimes. Clear my head. I didn't expect this." Josh set the cereal down, not gently. "Mom, what's going on?" She blinked, visibly flustered for the first time in ever. "It used to be our place," she said quietly. "Doug and I bought it back when we were married. After the divorce, he said he didn't want it. I've had a copy of the key all these years." "You didn't rent this?" Rachel asked. "You just brought us to your old beach house with your ex-husband?" "I didn't think he'd be here," she shot back, sharper now. "It's not like we were coming to hang out with him. I wanted you all to see the ocean. Like when you were kids." Doug chuckled, which made it worse. "Nice to know. I still have a role in the family vacation." "You don't," she snapped. "You haven't for a long time." The air was thick. The waves crashing outside felt suddenly too loud. I stepped in, trying to steady things. "Look, do you still legally own this place?" I asked Doug. He nodded. Technically, yeah. We never sold it. Just kind of forgot about it. So you just come down here sometimes? Few weekends a year? Not like I live here. I looked at Mom. You didn't think to check if he still had access? She looked down. I didn't think he'd show up. It's been years. Doug glanced around the room, then sighed. Look, I don't want to ruin anything. You guys clearly have plans. I can sleep on the porch, or I can head out. I just came for a quiet weekend and some groceries. No, I said before Mom could respond. We're not going to make you sleep outside. That's ridiculous. But we're going to need to talk. All of us. Because something about this didn't sit right. Not just that Mom had brought us here without telling us the full truth, but the way she reacted, the way she avoided eye contact, the way Doug wasn't as surprised as he claimed. It felt like a reunion that was never meant to include us. And suddenly, this wasn't just a beach trip anymore, it was something else entirely. That afternoon was awkward in the way that only unresolved history can make things awkward. Doug didn't leave, and Mom didn't ask him to. We all sat on the back deck pretending to enjoy the ocean breeze while avoiding eye contact. Josh stayed mostly quiet, clearly trying to decide if he should be mad or just confused. Rachel kept texting someone furiously and pretending she wasn't. I kept watching Mom. She wasn't rattled, not really. She was too calm. Too collected for someone who'd just accidentally run into the man she divorced 15 years ago. After dinner store, bought pizza, and silence, we all ended up around the fire pit. Doug opened a beer, offered one to me, and then, out of nowhere, said, I didn't know she still thought about this place. Mom looked away. He took a sip. We bought this house on a whim, he said, almost like he was talking to himself. She saw it in a magazine. Said she needed to hear the ocean to feel alive again. We weren't doing great back then, but this place, it gave us a few good summers. I expected her to shut him down, change the subject, snap like she used to, but she didn't. She just nodded. It was the only place we didn't fight, she said softly. Rachel finally snapped. Okay, can someone explain why we're having a nostalgic walk down memory lane with the guy who ghosted our entire childhood? Doug winced. Mom sat up straighter. He didn't ghost you. We agreed he wouldn't stay involved. That made us all stop. Josh leaned forward. What? It wasn't a clean divorce, she said. You remember the yelling, the tension? But what you didn't see was how we went to counseling, how we wrote letters, how we met at this house twice a year after the papers were signed to talk like adults. Not for you. For us. You? Met here? I said, after the divorce? A few times, she said. It was our way of grieving the marriage. Quietly. Rachel stood up, arms crossed. So you were still seeing him while raising us like he didn't exist? It wasn't like that, she said. It was never about rekindling anything. It was closure. It just took longer than I expected. Doug cleared his throat. And maybe part of me always hoped she'd change her mind. But she never did. Mom looked at him then, and there was a moment brief but real where I saw something pass between them. Something sad and unfinished. Josh spoke next. So why now? Why bring us here? Why risk running into him if you knew this was his place too? Mom didn't answer right away. Then she said, because I wanted to see if it still hurt. That shut us up. She looked around at each of us. You kids are grown now. You have your own lives. I spent so many years trying to be strong for you, and somewhere along the line I forgot what I needed. This place reminded me of who I used to be before the fighting, before the routines, before everything got so heavy. And what did you figure out? I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That it doesn't hurt anymore, but it also doesn't feel like home. The fire popped, the waves kept rolling in, same as always. Doug finished his beer and stood up. Well, that's my cue. I'll head out tomorrow morning. You've got more right to this place than I do. You still own half, I said. Paperwork says so. He nodded. Yeah, but it never belonged to me the way it did to her. And with that, he went inside. We sat there for a while longer. No one said much. The kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable, just full. Like something heavy finally got put down. The next morning, I got up early. The sun was just creeping over the horizon, casting that golden pink glow across the water, and the air was still cool enough to make your breath visible. I made coffee, stood on the porch, and just listened to the ocean for a while. I don't know if you've ever stood still long enough near the sea to hear your thoughts start to organize themselves, but that's what happened. For the first time in years maybe, I felt like I was catching up with myself. Doug's car was gone by the time I walked around to the driveway. No note, no awkward goodbye, just gone. And honestly, that felt right. Whatever needed to be said had been said. Or maybe it hadn't, but it had existed out in the open long enough to stop hurting. The rest of the house was quiet. Rachel was still asleep, and Josh was out cold on the couch, probably dreaming of cereal and awkward silences. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table, already dressed, sipping coffee from a chipped mug that had a faded anchor on it. She didn't say anything when I walked in, just gestured to the chair across from her like we'd done this 100 times before. I sat down. We both stared out the window for a minute. "You okay?" I finally asked. She nodded. "Better than I expected. You knew he might be here, didn't you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, I knew it was possible. I told myself I'd deal with it if it happened. I just didn't expect you all to be here for it. I leaned back in my chair. "You could have told us, Mom." She sighed. "I know, but then you wouldn't have come." She wasn't wrong. If she'd texted, "Hey kids, want to spend the weekend at the beach house I used to share with my ex-husband who might still have a key," we all would have suddenly had plans. But here's the thing. I was glad I came, even with the weirdness, even with the tension, because somewhere in all of that was truth. Real truth. Not the kind you get from family dinners and holiday cards, the kind that's messy and layered and still finding its shape. "You still love him?" I asked. She didn't blink. "Number. But I remember loving him. And sometimes that's harder." I nodded. That made sense to me. We packed up around noon, folded towels, wiped counters, took one last walk down to the edge of the water. Rachel cried a little, quietly, and I didn't ask why. Josh wrote something in the sand her last name, probably, and watched it wash away. As we were leaving, Mom stood on the porch for a second and looked back at the house like it was both a friend and a stranger. "I think I'm ready to sell it," she said. Finally. "You sure?" I asked. She nodded. It was never really the house. It was what it held. But I think we've all carried what we needed from it now. I drove her home. Just me and her this time. She talked about wanting to start painting again. Said she was thinking about getting a dog. For the first time in a long while, her voice sounded more like her. Not the version of her that holds things together, but the one that dreams a little. That laughs a little too hard at dumb jokes. That hums along to the radio like she used to when we were kids in the back seat. When I pulled into her driveway, she looked at me and said, "Thanks for not leaving when things got uncomfortable." I smiled. "Thanks for not pretending it wasn't." She laughed. Then she leaned over and said, "Next trip, maybe let's just go to a hotel." I laughed too. And I knew even if we never set foot in that beach house again, a part of it would always come with us. Not because of Doug, not because of the ocean view, but because it reminded all of us maybe for the first time in years that family isn't always about what you plan. Sometimes it's about what you sit through together, what you're willing to understand, and what you're strong enough to let go of.